The Neighbours. This poem arrives in a simple gift as old Bill has made a decision to try to help Billy to avoid the welfare officers by giving him the keys to his house to keep the welfare officers off his back, who don't want him to live in a train. As the reader, we can see that old Bill has already decided to give Billy the house, but it is only formally revealed to the reader in this poem, in a very understated way. We'll come to that later. There are a few poetic techniques at play in this poem. We'll look particularly at repetition, excuse the handwriting, contrast and irony. There is also some significant character development that occurs in a couple of specific lines in this poem in relation to the whole story. Throughout this poem there is a repetition, an emphasis on me versus them. That is, the character old Bill as me versus the them being the neighbours. This opposition factor, me versus them, is set up early in the poem with the repeated use of they. They saw me mowing, they came to the fence to ask questions. This is followed with the repeated use of I, and straight away there is a push and pull going on. This continues throughout the poem. We also notice that the them is the poem is more forceful and active compared to the passive and defensive old Bill. We've got these continued use of I, they, I went back, I wasn't any good, and I wondered if I ever will be. Also, again, we see how active and forceful, perhaps, the neighbours are in the language by the fact that they came to the fence to ask many questions. These are very active verbs compared to old Bill, who is more defensive. These repeated use of I makes him sound defensive, sets up a defensive tone. I told them I owned this house but lived elsewhere and I'd just rented it out. I, and, but. This goes on to the repetition of and at the start of these three lines, which has the same effect. And he was moving in soon, and he'd keep this grass mown and look after the place for me. It has the tone of a person who feels like they are in trouble or under fire, on the back foot. Overall, the repetition of questions adds to this feeling of pressure and intimidation. Now we'll have a look at contrast. There is a contrast between how the poet represents how the neighbours speak, persistent and forceful, and how old Bill speaks. He speaks with a low modality, or a low urgency or sense of authority. We can see this in casual phrases like lad, look after the place, and old man. Again, with that seems to please them. There is again a lack of urgency in old Bill's voice and a lack of authority. In the context of A Simple Gift, there are significant moments for both characters, old Bill and Billy. Old Bill has gradually warmed to Billy, and his description of Billy here as a friend of the family is a signpost of how far that friendship has actually come from when they were neighbours on a train sharing breakfast. and when old Bill particularly was a reluctant participant in those meetings. The final lines are also significant. There is a hint of hope in old Bill's words. I wasn't any good with neighbours, and I wondered if I ever will be. This shows some intention or hope for the future. There is also irony in these last lines. Old Bill thinks he isn't any good with neighbours, but where have we seen evidence of this in the story so far? Who was old Bill's last neighbour? Was it not the boy who he has just reached out to by giving him the keys to his house? The boy for whom he dressed up, shaved, and put on a show for the welfare officer. Although Bill doesn't realise it, the author shows the audience that in fact old Bill is better with neighbours than he realises. But ultimately, this is a poem where we feel sympathy for old Bill. He shows a lot of heart. We see him as a victim, being preyed upon by prying, though well-meaning neighbours. The author shows us that while old Bill is in many ways the hero of the story, sadly, old Bill can't see that himself, and sees himself here simply as someone who isn't any good with neighbours.